So welcome everybody to the first webinar of EJN. Welcome to the panelists today involved in this fantastic meeting. So before starting this series of webinars, I think is needed an important thought to one of the most important personality of our network and the whole cultural sector in Europe, to be honest, that unfortunately passed away 2 days ago. I'm speaking about John. Lovely John Cumming. John was, with his creativity, his professionalism, his strength, his vision, his generous soul, and also his extraordinary and lovely sense of humor, a source of inspiration and also an active mentor for all of us. Ciao, John. We loved you so much. I just learned today that his ashes will also be launched with a rocket on the sky. This is a news that I received today in the morning, to be honest. I hope the ashes will fall like drops of wisdom and inspiration for all of us and for all the human beings of the cultural sector that he loved so deeply in his life. Ciao, John. We really miss you. Everyone is missing the unforgettable comrade we had the pleasure to meet in our life. Thank you very much. Ciao, John. So let's start, my friend. Sorry for this beginning, but John was one of the most important personality in our family, in our network. So COVID-19, the crisis, what is happening now? I mean, what happened in the last months left everyone stunned, astonished. We are still in shock. And all in these days, we are beginning to see some lights. As EJN, we immediately reacted to this situation. We created a crisis unit together with all the other European cultural networks. We signed 3 letters addressed to the European Commission, to the national governments, and we received important feedbacks for the European Commissions, especially the incumbent EU Commissioner Maria Gabriel, and also from Maria Gabriel and Ursula von der Leyen just a few days ago. I mean, they told us, not only us, but all the cultural network operators in Europe, that they are really happy to see that the cultural sector is answering, is writing with a unique voice. That is really important because I think that other sectors didn't have the same reaction that we did all together. So, we saw a lot of different things. We started immediately a survey behind and inside our association. We collected all the information coming from our members regarding the national government measures taken by the different countries. And then we have a picture of what is happening, sometimes in a very, very different way. Some countries reacted immediately and created, a fantastic tools also for artists and organization. Some other are still shocked and consider the culture not one of the most important sector of the civil society. And this is a big pity because we create a lot of percentage in the GDP together with tourism and culture in every country. So some measures were in conflict. We saw also in our life. I mean, all the countries didn't react together, so the reaction was isolated, and there is a lack of solidarity. Let's say we need a global solidarity, and so far we haven't seen enough of it, to be honest. Also, we have to be aware that this crisis could change the face of culture, live shows, the job market, the music industry, everything. It will affect everything. I mean, the artists, the organization, labels, technicians, everybody. So we are starting to see some lights, to be honest. In the last few days, we received information. Today, for example, we organized a meeting with the crisis unit inside EJN. And some European countries are opening their venues for, 50 people till 1 week ago. Now it's for 200 in some European countries, like, for example, Norway, Italy, 400, 1,000 for some country open air. but with a lot of restriction that we have, of course, to follow, because I mean the virus is not, it's not easy to deal with. So the idea also of this seminar is not to, we don't want to make a ranking of the different European country measures. It's not the aims of this webinar, but we would like to present the best practices in some way. So let's introduce my friends that are here waiting for us. Just a very short presentation, then we start to discuss about everything. So the first is Kim. Please introduce yourself. What are you doing, and a lot of the phases that you have in a different sector of the creativity in UK. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Kim Macari. I'm a trumpet player, and I also do a number of other things. Like Battista said, I'm chair of the Jazz Promotion Network, which is a body that looks after jazz in the UK and Ireland. I program the Vortex Jazz Club in Dalston in London, and I also work for Arts Council England. So I've been involved in making decisions about the emergency funding for the cultural sector in England.
Thank you, Kim. And now let's go to Ikaros, the presentation, old friend of us, please.
Hi, everybody online. I'm Ikaros van Duppen. I work for the Cultural Foundation of the Dutch Copyright Society, Buma Stemra. And we organize all kinds of events for the music industry to promote Dutch music, but also to connect to our European peers. One of those projects is inJazz. It's a conference end of June every year in Rotterdam. This year we'll go online on the 25th and 22nd of June when it was supposed to happen. And we're happy that two of the big jazz venues in the Netherlands, Lantaarnvenster and Bimhuis, will also offer these evenings a live stream with some of the bands from Holland that we were supposed to present then.
So thank you very much. And I'll go to Barbara Canepa from Pro-Helvetia, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm Barbara Canepa. I work for the Swiss Arts Council, Pro-Helvetia, in the music department, and I'm especially in charge of the promotion of jazz.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Last but not least, our friends Mario recently came back from Germany and now in Austria, I think.
Yes, hi, I'm Mario Steidl. I'm the artistic director of the Jazzfestival Saalfelden, which takes place every year at the end of August. And I also run a little club, the Kunsthaus Nexus. It's a venue also in Saalfelden with about 300 events per year, going from concerts, exhibitions, theaters, cinema, and so on.
So thank you very much, Mario. So as you can see, I mean, we have a lot of different, part of the music business, let's say, from artists, collecting society, organizing national organization, venues, and festival also, because Mario is organizing this fantastic festival in Saalfelden and also the venue. And yes, so I already spoke about the research that we did as EJN. That is available for all the members of EJN. We continue to also to work with this crisis unit every Wednesday. This is a message addressed to the members of EJN. If you want to join, it's 1 hour only. I mean, it's brainstorming every week. And then yes, let's go directly with speaking about the best practices or what is happening in some European countries. Of course, I mean, we have 35 countries represented inside EJN with 160 plus members. We cannot have a comprehensive let's say meeting with speaking navigation of all the country measures. But and also in Europe we have 28 countries, but we pick the four that we considered not the most important, but the specific one, let's say. So probably, I mean, the idea also of the webinar is that probably this crisis will lead to a radical change in the paradigm of the organization of the live shows everywhere, not only Europe. So we must be ready to indicate possible change and the possible new routes, and try to analyze the best practice. Let's start with you, Kim. I mean, let's say that in UK, unfortunately, the perfect storm has occurred. First, the Brexit, with a possible risk of cultural isolation. and the related possible problem of transnational mobility for everybody, all the artists coming in and going out, and then the COVID-19. In short, is not a promising scenario. How is the situation in UK?
I know you're absolutely right. I don't think any of us thought there'd be another topic of conversation that would trump Brexit, but we found one. So we went into full lockdown on the 24th of March. And before that, there was a kind of staggered lockdown that moved quite slowly. The UK government hasn't yet given any direct intervention to any sector. What it's done is it's provided a service by which employees can receive 80% of their earnings from the government. So there's a furlough scheme, which they've now said is going to be extended probably at a lower rate until October. And for self-employed people, which of course encompasses almost everyone in the cultural sector, an equivalent was finally launched recently. It's taken a couple of months to get together, but using 3 years of tax returns, they've calculated what 80% of self-employed people's earnings are, and that was delivered into people's banks in the last few days. I, as I said, worked for Arts Council England, and they set up an emergency relief fund for the cultural sector in England very promptly. So they took £160 million from their budget for the year and repurposed that. So 20 million of that went to individuals. 50 million went to organisations that we don't currently fund regularly, and 90 million went to the portfolio of organisations that receive 3-year funding from us. So multiple new funding streams were developed within a 10-day period, with the key directive being that we got the money out to people who needed it as quickly as possible. So I've just, along with a lot of my colleagues, just finished the decision-making panels for all of the individuals, and we're about to go into the 90 million that's been allocated for the portfolio organisations in culture. What that takes us to really, and the way that we're thinking is that it takes us to September. And what happens after that is what we're working on now. So there's a number of committees that have been set up by government to collate information about the impact. So currently the cultural sector in the UK is losing £75 million a month. What we have left as Arts Council England, our budget that remains for 2020 is about 57 million. So even if we were to repurpose all of that for emergency purposes, it wouldn't even touch the side of what the need is. So us, like every other sector, is collating impact data so that we can lobby for intervention. Sadly, culture has been basically non-existent in the discourse politically about surrounding this crisis. So it feels like we probably wouldn't be high on the priority list of sectors to receive support. But we are seeing quite a lot of media around it, a lot of organisations that I think the public feel were very stable organisations are reporting how fragile they actually are. And what we found with the data is, well, as if we didn't know already, but what it proves very clearly is how fragile the lives of practitioners and organisations in the cultural sector are. In the music team in particular, we were finding that music was slightly lagging behind the other art forms in terms of successful applications to the Individuals Fund. So we're gathering a lot of information that we can then use to, to help shape how we support the sector in future. But it's not a good setup when you think that we're also dealing with Brexit, which, as far as we know, is going to go ahead. Obviously, all of our venues are closed, and it feels like as we lagged behind the lockdown measures with other countries, we will find ourselves slower to reopen, and travel is going to be obviously severely impacted. So musicians, like other cultural practitioners, are trying to look at their workload and figure out how they make a living going forward. So obviously there's been lots and lots of new digital content of varying qualities popping up from organisations and individuals. Quite a lot of effort from some organisations to collate that information and deliver it in one place so that audiences can find things. There was a study published, I think, today, which said that 19% of people would feel comfortable going to a venue again when lockdown was open. So we've got a long way to go to rebuild a physical audience when we're able to rebuild one. And what that will look like and how events will take place in the future, we don't know yet.
Wow, thank you very much, Kim. I mean, this 19% is promising. I mean, the problem is also economic. Did you finish, by the way? Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's promised, but yes, people will have to go. I mean, to socialize, going to the club and venues and festival. Of course, they are. The live streaming is a subsidized situation, temporary. Let's say. We'll speak about also these in one of the webinar of EJN, and then we will speak also about the monetization of the live streaming. That is the main problem nowadays. I mean, except from some, European countries that are successful in this, to be honest. I mean, the 90% of the other European countries and the world, I think, is struggling really hard to monetize, the live streaming, especially for the artists. That is one of the most affected, let's say, sector. And okay, so speaking about the artists, let's jump to Ikaros, because you not only represent the festival and that is inJazz, that we have been there last year. It was a fantastic showcase, international showcase, but you also represent the collecting societies. So what is your opinion regarding this and what your government did?
What actually was told by Kim is a bit the same what happened in Holland. At first, when we went into lockdown, which was around 13th of March, I think, there were some generic measures taken. So self-employed people, companies could opt for 3 months to get money. They could put people, they don't have to fire people, so they could have them paid by the government up till 90% of the money for their salaries. This was a measure for 3 months, which today actually was another 3 months added to that. So the summer will also cover that. And we will need that definitely, because a lot of the companies are really in trouble. Especially in the arts, it's a big problem. For the self-employed people, it's a big problem because they fall out of many of the systems that have been set up to help them. After the generic measures, there were also some specific measures for sectors taken. That was a bit later. As everybody noticed that it was needed for the cultural sector. We were actually one of the first, the cultural sector, that got money, but it wasn't a lot. We got about 300 million for the whole arts sector. And if you think that our flight company KLM got 4 billion for it, and we are about 3.7% of the national income, and they are about 1%. Politically enough, that's had been many talks about that. So there are some measures. There's a lot of pressure on the minister to help us more, because it's needed a lot, especially for the self-employed, as I say, because they have very many problems. They have many sources of income to get their money from. So it's very hard for them to get to the money and to show that they need it. From a copyright side of point for the composers, and also actually for the performing rights, what we did is there was an emergency fund put up by the Copyright Society, Buma, and SENA, the Performing Rights Society, of about 3.5 million, and that will be added. Actually, Spotify is one of the partners also that tries to get some extra funding into that fund. And we might actually get some money also from the national government, especially for composers and performers, to add to that. But that's something which we are still talking to the ministry about. I know I haven't been involved, but I know from some people at the Copyright Society that there are also talks in between the copyright societies from the different countries. But at this moment, I think the situation is so complex, and every country, the measures are slightly different, and the ways to deal with it are also slightly different, that I don't think there will be an international emergency fund or something like that happening at the moment, at least. Maybe a little bit longer far ahead we will be able to do something collectively, but at the moment I don't see that. There's also a lot of other fundings in the Netherlands, private fundings that are dealing with this, and they the funds they gave before, they will not stick to the rules that are put up to that. Like if somebody applied for a festival and they had to do so many shows and they did something else, they will be very flexible in that. But it's in Holland, it's quite, we think about the measures taken, it still means that 30% of the venue says they will have to close down before or in summer. And the income of artists, self-employed artists, goes down to 80% at the moment. So that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ikaros. It's not could be a promising situation, could be not a promising situation. I mean, the fact that also the collecting society are not taking the same measures, it could be, you know, a problem for everybody, for all the artists. I mean, we create something like inequality around all the artists, unfortunately. I mean,
yeah, I think the cultural situation in every country is so different, and the measures taken are just also different. So that means that it's hard to that we as a sector need to work together a lot to keep connected.
But the cultural sector, to be honest, all the cultural network granted by Creative Europe, for example, are, you know, all united. We have, you know, a channel of communication, let's say, not in a daily basis, but we can regularly, you know, meet and send information also to Creative Europe. But again, I mean, I have to underline that the Europe is not, there is no competence on the culture directly. The competence of the culture is on the, you know, national governments. Yes. So it's important that we push our governments to consider culture an important part of the GDP. I mean, the gross deposit, the GDP is important. I mean, you told you spoke about the 3%, 4%. In Italy, for example, is the 13%. I mean, not only the culture, but also together with the touristic sector. I mean, it's a lot. And then we get from the GDP, for example, 0 point something. It is not, you know, good. I mean, in these days, we are working. Our artists are working also to maintain the you know, the society alive in some way. But anyway, let's go to Switzerland. Dear Barbara, yes, you represent a national organization. I mean, that works in different disciplines and not only in music. So tell us about the situation in Switzerland. Thank you.
So the situation in Switzerland is actually very similar as Ikaros and Kim also called. So maybe more similar to the Netherlands than to the UK. I have to say that the Swiss government, despite standards and renommee, and also despite the fact that Switzerland is a federal state, react very quickly to the situation. And starting at the beginning of March, they start to, Pro-Helvetia and the Federal Office of Culture, start to meet and to exchange about the situation and the possible measures that could have been taken. But also there was a group of representatives from the various culture sectors. So all disciplines have also been invited and were involved from the outset in a roundtable, so that the needs of the scene has been listened from the beginning, I would say. And until now, once a week, we are exchanging. So Pro-Helvetia and the Federal Office of Culture are still exchanging and continually monitoring the situation in order to respond quite quickly to the measures. So we can check if the measures we took or the government took are successful or not. All these measures, so the COVID regulation that had been decided on around the end of March, initially she was limited until today, as in the Netherlands, but last week they decided to extend the measures until September 20. What they decided, so the financial contribution of these financial supplementary measures, has been decided is about the first tranche is 280 million, and it has to be distributed in 3 ways. One as an emergency aid for non-profit organization and artists. When I'm talking of non-profit organization and artists, I'm talking of every disciplines, not only music. This is very important. A second way is a compensation of losses for profit and non-profit organization, but also for artists. And then they decided that a small part, so 10 million, is going into the lay culture sector. Except of the emergency aid and financial support for the lay sector, the compensation of losses is in the hand of the cantons. And that was a hard fight. So the Swiss government decided to give 145 million of francs to distribute this money between all the 26 cantons, but the cantons has been obliged to double the amount they got and let this amount and also handle all this application. By now, I would say the emergency aid is it seems to work quite well, and it's a maximum of 5,000 francs per month for a maximum of 6 months.
Sorry, Barbara, just change it in euro so we understand,
at the moment it's 1-to-1, so
okay.
5,000 euro, 5,000 euro, or a bit more, maybe 6,000 euro, I would say, not more. And but it's a nice, uncomplicated system, so that us artists and also non-profit organization can get quite quickly their money. I know by last Monday, so May 18th, they got around 1,100 applications. They could decide about 250 and 238 out of these 250 has been positively decided. The compensation of losses is a bit maybe more complicated because it's based on one side on a tax return of last year, which can be a bit complicated for artists if they are not if 2019 they didn't earn a lot. It's a bit it's complicated. But also you will have 80% on your losses on the concert that you couldn't play, or as a promoter on the events you couldn't organize. So one of the important points, and also is a question that's still open. It's not. I mean, it's a status or the social status of the artist in Switzerland. They, in order to let them be considered, so they had to, Pro-Helvetia and the Federal Office of Culture had to fight, really, especially Pro-Helvetia had to fight by the government to let the musician be considered as self-employed, as a self-employed person, so that they could ask also for this compensation of losses. If not, the only way would be the social welfare, which everybody wanted to avoid, actually. From the compensation of losses, also from the works of the cantons, it's a bit longer, so it takes more time to get a decision. And actually, by now, we don't have any feedbacks. I only know, just to finish, that around 3,000 application has been considered by now, and but only 215 has been positively decided.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara. So last but not least, our friend Mario. I mean, at the beginning, Austria was one of the brilliant countries that took some interesting decision, but recently you told me that there was something wrong. I mean, there was, but I know also that you recently opened last week your venue, and it's a good news after 2 months of stop. So Mario, tell us about something about Austria. Thank you.
Well, we didn't open the venue. We're allowed to do so from next week on, but let me come back to this later. In regards to the help for musicians, at first it really looked as if Austria would react very quickly and help artists and cultural workers. So depending on their previous income, musicians received between 500 and 1,000 euros as an emergency aid, which is not very much. But very many of them didn't receive anything at all due to the low income in the previous year, or for other reasons like having a second income as a freelancer or something else. And now, since last week, I think the measures to help musicians have been significantly improved, but at least only theoretically, as I get very different feedbacks from musicians on this. Some of them tell me that it's very bureaucratical, that it's very difficult. Some of them tell me that they receive nearly nothing. So in April, musicians have received 500 euros if they were under an annual income of 6,000 euros a year, and 1,000 if they have earned more than 6,000 per year. Now the first emergency aid has been raised up to 1,000 euros per person, for every artist who is part of the social insurance system in Austria. And in addition to this, artists now can claim the 3 months from 2019 during which they have earned most, and then they will receive 80% of this income up to a ceiling of 2,000 euros for the next 3 months. But, and I think that's a huge problem, the income from concerts in other countries is not included. So it's, of course, this is very bad for musicians who tour a lot or who work in other countries. And in addition to this, some states in Austria support musicians with working grants, and I heard that this works very well. Like in Vienna, you get about 3,000 euros, and you can create a project free of choice, and you don't have to pay back the money. And also other states like Salzburg and Carinthia have these working grants. In general, I have to say, in regards to the cultural policy of recent weeks, Austria has not covered itself with glory. During the 8 weeks of the lockdown, our government merely held one press conference in which there were no statements at all about the future of cultural life in Austria. So cultural initiatives run as non-profit organizations were completely ignored in the emergency aid packages until last week, when an aid package was decided to help these associations as well. But nobody knows yet how the whole thing will run, how much support we will get. So we will see. And so due to the growing criticism of the cultural scene, the Minister of Culture resigned last week, and at least a first plan was presented now as to when the cultural institutions could reopen. So, sorry. So we will be allowed to promote concerts again from next week on, from May 29th for 100 people, from July on for 250 people, and in August for 500 people, or even for 1,000 people if the promoter can present a safety plan. But nobody knows yet what that means, as the decree of the ministry will come out not earlier than on May 25th. But it seems, of course, that the people have to save the distance of 1 meter. Only seating events will be allowed, so no standing events, no dancing, of course. And, well, we will know more next week. But what I have to say, I really hope that these spacing rules will not go on longer than until fall, because if we have to reopen everything, and then we will have the full expenses for staff, advertising, and so on, but only the half, or at least the half income, and this would be very problematic, not just for us as promoters, but also for many musicians, because how many clubs would book musicians if they can't even afford the fee anymore because they only have space for 40 or 50 people, you know, and that's the situation now in Austria.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mario. I mean, we all need, public support. There is no alternative to this, because also this crisis is also an economic crisis for all the people. I mean, they lost their jobs outside the cultural sector, I think. I mean, they lost their job, so they need to feed themselves and their families. It's important also to see, that the cultural sector must be helped by the public money. No way. I mean, okay, anyway, thank you very much for everything. I would like to speak also, 2 minutes about the other countries, because when we started this crisis, first of all, I would like to say something regarding all the listeners now on Facebook, and we reached 80 people. And if you want to, ask some questions, we can have a Q&A session just at the end in 10 or 12 minutes. So if you would like to write some questions, please write in the comment of Facebook. And then there will be Stefano and Francesca behind the scene. They are backstage here, that will select the most interesting question they will propose to us, so we can answer to you. So there is an interaction between us. So, I mean, other countries reacted immediately. For example, the March 25th, I think, Monika Grutters, that is the responsible of the culture in Germany, announced a 50 billion investment plan for the cultural sector. It was a sort of shockwave for whole Europe, to be honest, because it's a huge amount of money. Discussing today with other German, members of EJN regarding this, there was no plan actual. I mean, no activity right now. I mean, I'm sure they are thinking about something like this, and then how to implement this kind of big investment plan. So also Germany, I mean, they announced and they did the 5,000 euro support for 3 months for all the artists and freelance, and again for 3 months. And then again, it's different from the support that we listen today from other countries, or for example, for the 600 euros that has been allocated in Italy for the artist. And then a lot of people received this money just after 3 days of this email sent to the tax office in Germany. But according to other report that we received today, not all the people are received this money, and so they're waiting till 6 weeks right now. And recently there was in Germany also a statement made by Angela Merkel directly, just 6 days ago, regarding culture, artists, etc. Because in Germany the situation is that the competence of the culture is on a national level, and then the federal. So she was pushing all the federal government, local government, to invest also in the cultural sector and help the central government to do something. And then also in France, for example, just a few days ago, on May 6th, Macron announced also a big investment plan for the cultural sector. According also to what the press wrote, I mean, he also proposed an extension of the layoffs for the worker of the show business till August 2021. This could help a lot all the artists, technicians, all the people working in the background of our sector. And I can speak a little bit about Italy. I mean, the cultural, topic was not in the agenda of the government since 2 or 3 weeks ago, to be honest. I mean, of the Prime Minister, not the Minister of Culture, because he did a fantastic job in the last days. And then they announced, the Ministry of Culture, Dario Franceschini, announced the plan for the touristic and cultural sector of 5 billion euros, 4 allocated for the touristic sector, and 1 allocated for the cultural sector, also creating something like his own idea about a public live streaming service. for the artists. I mean, run by the central government. So he allocated something like 10 million euros on this. So let's open the discussion between us, and then they are writing to me that we are receiving some comments and questions. So we will receive these questions later. Okay. So the first one that you want to comments on this between us, my friends. Kim.
Well, I think what is really missing, and you see it at the measures in Holland, which is we're open for 30 people's of audience in the 1st of June. Then we might go up till 100 people in July, and bigger festivals are suspended till the 1st of September. But they even said, the minister said that we have to wait till there's a vaccine, and this means this is so insecure what's going to happen. And this is a big problem for the sector. You can't plan, you can't do anything, you can't organize. If you have to book tours or things like that, this is impossible. So how to deal with that is really a problem for the sector, I think. And yeah.
I know in Switzerland, all the events with more than 1,000 people are forbidden until the end of August also. And we are all waiting next week. The government should talk and see if it's possible to reopen some clubs with how many people? I don't know. I mean, restaurants just opened 1 week ago. It's with very strict rules about distance and so. And so far as I know, the Association of the Clubs and Festivals in the music sector in Switzerland, they are working now on these measures, safety measures, to find a solution. But still open the question if only 20 people can go to and sit in a club and listen to a concert. From the financial side, it's a bit heavy, a bit difficult.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, let's mix all the script of today. I mean, we have a plan, but I mean, we just received a question regarding this. So let's jump into this. I mean, the question, and then now Stefano and Francesca will broadcast it. The question is, it could be interesting to understand the rules in these 4 countries to reopen for clubs, theater, etc. So we jumped inside before the question. So thank you, Barbara and Ikaros, and Mario and Kim. Do you have any news regarding you already told something regarding the numbers of people allowed in each venue, but let's repeat it, and then I can say something about Italy. Just 2 seconds.
Well, in Austria, as I said, we still wait for a decree that we will get next week, under which conditions we can reopen the club. Which, of course, is a bit late because we will be allowed to open on the 29th, and the decree will come next week on Monday. But it seems, as I said, only seating concerts are allowed, and there has to be the space between the people for 1 meter. And as it seems, we have to do something like a trace system, so that everybody has to sit on his chair, with a number, and we as promoters need to collect the email address, home address, phone number, and so on, to be allowed to make concerts. And of course, it's the fact that you are not allowed to make concerts outside. Standing concerts is very difficult, because where outside shall we have more than 100 or 200 chairs, and bring them to wherever, that maybe you can do so in a big city, like the Festspiele Salzburg, they can do something like this. But here, in the middle of nowhere, you can maybe go to a park, but it's very difficult to close the whole park, to be sure that you can count the people, how many people can go in, to bring the whole chairs and everything there. So that's very difficult with these seating options and with this a space of 1 meter. And the silly thing is that in the restaurants, you're allowed now to sit on tables together with 5 people on 1 table, but you're not allowed to sit together with 5 people in a concert.
Thank you, Mario. Do you have any news in UK, Kim, regarding this possible opening?
They haven't they haven't made any clear statements on this, like on many other issues. What we're noticing now, though, is that they recently announced that they wanted schools to reopen on June the 1st, and they've since had, I think it's over 1,000 schools push against that and say that they're not comfortable, that they don't think that it's safe, and they're not going to have their schools open on that date. I think the general consensus is that the public don't want things to move fast before we feel safe, and the government want to relax restrictions so that they are not accountable for anything that happens as a result of people gathering. So there hasn't really been any discussion or any sort of mention of what large gatherings would look like. There's an opera company in England that are going to start drive-in operas to get around not being able to gather in one space. But aside from that, we haven't had any instruction. And as I say, with culture being quite low down on the priority list, I feel like as a sector, we're going to be waiting quite a long time until we understand how we can reopen.
So thank you. No, because today we had a crisis unit of EJN, and we had some news regarding this. I can speak about, for example, Norway. I mean, they opened last week for 50 people, the venues, and then they are going to open, I think, this week for 200 people. With all the restriction, of course, that you mentioned it all before. I mean, 1 meter for the people, no standing, no dancing, no foods, no drinks in the venues. And then I can say, for example, in Sweden, they were always open for 50 people, as far as I know. And in Italy, again, from the 15th of June, they will open the venues for 200 people inside, all seated with a lot of restriction, thermal scanner, and sanification of the toilets and everything. No paper tickets, no money, only online tickets or something like this, and up to 1,000 people seated, controlled for the open air concerts. This is the situation in Italy, approved last Sunday. In Finland, they already opened with a limitation, of course. But again, the problem you raised now regarding the the possibility of the venue, the relationship between the income of the venue and the payment of the fee of the musicians and the technicians behind the scene, it's really it's still on the table. And yes, I mean this is the more or less the situation, and let's say that. Yes, and this is more or less the situation. There are other questions. Yes, thank you very much. By now, I mean, we will close at 6 sharp, so we have other 1 or 2 questions. I would like to get this one from Sanat Dailorman. I would like to hear your opinions about a digital live streaming versus physical live performance issue. Thank you. So this will be discussed properly in a separate session. It's an important issue, of course. This will be discussed in a proper session webinar of 1st of June inside this EJN, so stay tuned. And but I can say my opinion regarding this at the end of the roundtable. Let's speak about this problem: digital live streaming versus physical live performance. May I say something before? 2,500 years ago, some Greece, poets, or writer create the theater for socialization, to stay together, to create this relationship between artists from one side and audience. Full stop. Now it's up to you, my friends.
I think it's been quite interesting because obviously we've seen the whole of all cultural output move digitally. What we've seen here is that there's some artists and some organizations that were already thinking really seriously about digital content. So they were able to make that transition very quickly. And others have had to, or felt compelled to deliver stuff very, very quickly. And like I said, there's been a lot of fluctuation in terms of the quality of the output. But I think more importantly than that, we have to be careful that we're not expecting people to, say artists, we're not expecting artists to produce high quality creative work under these very odd circumstances. That there's this idea that lockdown provides people lots of time and that we're all going to come out having written new albums and new suites of music and learned new instruments, when in fact psychologically it's a very difficult time for people. Lots of people have other responsibilities, and so there definitely feels like people are being swept along by this tide of productivity and also of activity that people aren't comfortable maintaining and just staying safe. That we be mindful of, on the one hand, encouraging there to be some content that we can engage with, but on the other, allowing people the space to handle this very odd time in whatever way they feel comfortable with.
Thank you very much. And again, this will be discussed during the webinar of the 1st of June with the title, wait 1 second. It's this one, everything must change. So we have also, we have the confirmation of the panelists. Stay tuned on EJN website, because we will discuss about also things with some important person of the IT sector, some artists and organizer too, because I mean this problem will affect all the all the production chain, as it's called. So thank you very much. I mean, we have 7 minutes for the last questions, and then I'll say you goodbye. So the last question is Mark. Does anyone on the panel have an idea of the audience opinion on opening clubs and the strict rules applied? Had there been any survey so far? Yes, I think there was a survey, because you quote a survey, Kim, regarding 90% of the people would like to go back
90.
to...
19, not 90. Yeah,
19. It's a pity, because if it was 90, we can create like a protest.
Listen, for the Vortex, 90% would be better than we usually get, so that would be great. But 19 is not so great. I think we're really going to struggle. I think Mark makes a really good point. I don't think we've asked people what they want to happen and what they feel comfortable doing. We're imagining, or rather, the authorities are imagining that we open the doors and people flood in, and suddenly businesses are able to generate the money they used to generate on day one, when in fact, in reality, that's never going to happen.
So yeah, market, yeah. Go ahead, Barbara.
Just one thing, because actually in Switzerland they decided to open the restaurants, and the rules were everybody goes in and have to leave address, like Mario was what you said about the clubs. You leave your address, your phone number, and so on. And finally, it came out after 1 week that nobody does it. The restaurant owner should be obliged to ask them, but they don't. So I can imagine that for clubs, they would try also to do the same. It would make sense. But if the people, I don't know if they will play this game.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, also in the sense the question before about digital and live. I think in the future it will be some kind of mix between the two. Monetization has to do with that. How can we organize things in the future? But the audience is what makes why we can do what we want to do. And this question, Mark is actually involved in inJazz, and this is a topic we will be discussing at inJazz in our conference. And I think it's so important to get more details about how the audience will react once we reopen, and in the different circumstances, if it's either in a venue or outside in a festival, what does it mean? What can we expect? It's good to know, because that we can also use to convince our politicians that we need support in some sense.
Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, there is a last question. Is a direct question to Kim. Kim, is the mandatory quarantine of 14 days for people flying into the UK include people who are coming for work purposes? For example, touring musicians, and in the other country present on this panel. Sorry, there was another question. And in the other country present on this panel, are there plans for imposing quarantines on people flying in? That's a very serious question, discussed today by the think tank of EJN. Please go ahead, Kim.
I mean, at the moment, it's a sort of theoretical question, because even if touring musicians were part of the quarantine, they wouldn't be able to perform once they arrived. It's difficult to know what the restrictions will be, particularly because we've already, for the last 3 years, been trying to understand what the new government restrictions will be on touring musicians anyway, as a result of Brexit. So we really don't have any clear guidelines about if there will be mandatory measures of quarantine or any other measures. I imagine that there will be and that there will have to be, but there hasn't been any clear statement.
Okay.
That's pretty much the same for the Netherlands, that there's no idea yet. Also on holidays, some countries, questions we hear a lot about the southern countries opening up for holidays and what people had to do if they could go over, or what the government would think about that. They don't have an opinion on that yet, but they will soon. But I think there will be no, I'm not sure. Yeah, let's keep it by that.
Okay.
Well, in Austria, there won't be any border controls anymore from 15th of June on. So we open, of course, also for the tourists, because that's a very high part of our incomes coming from tourism. And yeah, from 15 June on, you don't have to be in quarantine or anything.
Switzerland is going to open with Austria, Germany, and France. Italy, it's not decided yet, but Italy opened for on the other side. So with no quarantine, of course. But I don't know how it will be for people now coming from Brazil, if they can fly in, or from the US. So it's no idea. They still don't communicate on it.
Okay, thank you. There is the very last question of our friend Minna Kaiser, that she's connected. Has any country announced how the regulation for clubs or events will be controlled? I can say what is happening in Italy, and then it's a very hard situation because there are a lot of restrictions. I mean, as I told you before, to everybody, no tickets, no paper tickets. And the thermoscanner and social distancing and the sanitization of all the services, and then 200 people. The only problem is that if something happened in this situation and you can prove that you get the virus in one of these events, there will be a criminal conviction on this, because it's like a pandemic guilty. So they are still discussing about this. I mean, the organizer is responsible of what is happening in the venue. Mm-hmm. If he or she doesn't follow the restriction and the rules. And it's a discussion also between all the organizers in Italy. I don't know in the other countries, to be honest, but the announcement that we can open has been taken with joy by everybody, of course. But we have to follow the rules first, because it's a serious pandemic, this one. So do you have any comments on this? Do you know nothing about the restriction, the regulation, how to be controlled in your country?
Not yet, no.
Okay, so we can close in a Swiss way, to be honest, Barbara. 6 sharp. Look at the clock. 6 sharp. It's fantastic. Wait, I will announce the webinar tomorrow, and 5 sharp again. And it's important. We have sorry, 1 second. Alone together. How do we maintain artistic quality and collaboration in isolation? Creativity and lockdown, a time of reflection and new composition, artist digital monologues, house concert and shows in venues without an audience. it's important because we have a lot of musicians coming also from USA, Norway, etc. Among them, there is also our friends Roy Nathanson, Pedro Melo Alves, Odrun Lija. Moderator will be Marta Aurelian Show, and we have our friend Kenneth Killen on it. So I would like to thank you all a lot for staying here with us. I mean, you are also part, I mean, Kim and Ikaros and Mario of the EJN think tank, and then we discussed a lot together in the last weeks and months about this crisis. I would like to thank you, Barbara, for having accepted this invitation. The EJN staff that is behind the scene, that is Francesca and Stefano, that are broadcasting all the the lower third and everything. Now we know also the TV sentence and idioms. And then, of course, the think tanks crisis unit, that it's an open discussion for the EJN member, and not only the EJN members of EJN, also for external and musicians and artists and agent. And then the EJN board and all the EJN members that support us, that are behind me. It's here, all the EJN members. This is the picture of taken in the European Jazz Conference, the last European Jazz Conference in Novara, Italy. And thank you very much. And ciao, John.
Ciao.
Everybody. Ciao.
Bye-bye.